Just an introduction of myself. I'm Eoin O'Dowd. I'm a building standards advisor with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage in the Built Environment Advisory Unit. For the past 3 years, the advisory unit, working in conjunction with the National Director for Fire and Emergency Management, has been conducting what we could term as a fundamental review of Technical Guidance Document B. The review, of course, started in 2011 with the public consultation on the then Technical Guidance Document B 2006, with a decision taken around 2015 to split the Technical Guidance document into 2 volumes, one for dwelling houses and one for buildings other than dwelling houses. The dwelling house document being published in 2017. Since then, particularly since the publication of Technical Guidance Document B reprint 2020, work has been ongoing in a critical examination of the Technical Guidance document. Say it's a fundamental review. The document was examined in a lot of detail, with every line of the document subject to examination in terms of the text, the interpretation, its application, and its relevance to the current built environment. As Paul said, I'm going to take you through the substantive changes of the building regulations and of the Technical Guidance document itself, with a view to providing an insight into the modifications both to the building regulations and to the Technical Guidance document itself. See if I can get the slide to move on. Okay. So I'd like to structure this presentation into 3 key components: the legislative changes, the structural changes, and the technical changes to the Technical Guidance document itself. Starting with the legislative changes, of course, associated with every Technical Guidance document is a building regulation or modification of the building regulations SI 497 of 1997. For this purpose, a draft amendment to the building regulations has been created, which will include a specific application of any new document, subject to the draft, subject to the public consultation and the post-public consultation process. There are dates included as part of the draft amendment to the building regulations to give an indication of when it may come into effect, but of course they will be subject to the full review process. Typically, a Technical Guidance document will come into effect around 6 months from the date of signing. There are also transitional arrangements proposed with substantive changes to Technical Guidance documents, Technical Guidance Document B being no different, that where developments are sufficiently advanced, such as having a planning permission, a notice under Part 8, a granted fire safety certificate, or having permission under the SHD process, that such works can be allowed to continue under the current guidance, subject to the works being completed by a certain time frame. There's an opportunity being taken at this point to examine and update the building regulations themselves to ensure that they are in keeping with current practice. There are proposals to update definitions within the building regulations, particularly the definition of a place of assembly, to ensure that the definition within SI 497 and the definitions within the Technical Guidance documents are aligned. There's also a proposal to introduce definitions in respect of storage facilities or uses, and of what we term as normal and high risk buildings within the building regulations themselves. There's a proposal to update Article 13, the provisions in respect of material changes of use, the application of the building regulations to particular circumstances, that where industrial high risk storage, normal risk or storage high risk becomes so used, that the provisions of the building regulations, again, particularly in this case Part B, would come into effect. There's also a proposal to update the second schedule to the building regulations, again focusing on the provisions relating to buildings other than dwellings, regulations B1 through to B5 as they're currently written. That regulation B1 will be modified to include a provision to provide means of alert in case of fire. Regulation B4 will be updated to include a provision that the facades of buildings should inhibit the spread of fire on the face of the building. And a new provision, regulation B12, is proposed to introduce a requirement to provide information on the completion of works to allow the building as designed and built to be operated. This provision, the B12 provision, it does follow on from application of similar provisions within other building regulations, particularly Part L and Part J, where information is provided on completion of works to allow facilities to be operated. This is seen as a bridge, as it were, from the application of the Building Control Act to the application of the Fire Services Act, from the conclusion of construction works to the commencement of management of a building. Moving on to the substantive structural changes to give an overview of what has happened to the technical guidance document. Shown on the slide is the construction of the current technical guidance document itself as it stands. It's broken up into 5 key sections and appendices. Section 0, the use. Section 1, means of escape. 2, internal fire spread linings, internal fire spread structure, external fire spread and access facilities. All totaled, there are 188 pages, 37 diagrams, 22 tables in the current TGD. The new draft technical guidance document B has been reconfigured and reconstructed into 7 key sections with a number of additional appendices added. We do have the known and understood sections 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It is proposed through the new draft to introduce a section 6 entitled Smoke Control Systems, where all provisions relating to the management of smoke in buildings to which the technical guidance document relates are collated into one section to allow for the seamless application of management of smoke, predicted smoke movement in buildings. Section 7 has also been created, taking the provisions that currently exist and enhancing them to facilitate and support the reuse of existing buildings. The reuse of existing buildings is a key objective of government to renew and incentivize and revitalize underused and underutilized buildings. As I said, there's a number of additional appendices which I'll go into through the substantial changes to the technical provisions of the document. All totaled, the document has 324 pages, 86 diagrams, and 36 tables. In fact, it has doubled in size, with a tripling of a near tripling of the number of diagrams. Moving on to the technical changes, starting at the start with section 0. There has been an update to the provisions specified in the technical guidance document for what are termed as alternative approaches. The update is to clarify the position of the technical guidance document as it stands in respect of the regulatory system, and is in keeping with the application and interpretation of technical guidance documents in general. There is no proposal to change or modify the provisions of section 7 of the building regulations SI 497, that is the provisions that allow for the publication of the technical guidance documents, the status of the technical guidance documents in providing prima facie means to compliance, but most importantly from the point of view of the application of alternative approaches, that Article 7.3 still remains in place, that the publication of the TGDs does not prohibit or preclude the use of any other specifications or standards, provided that the requirements of the building regulations are met. There has been taken an opportunity to include a specific scope for the application of the technical guidance document. At the moment, the TGDs are generally directed towards simple and non-complex buildings. In the case of the broad fire safety requirements set out in the TGD, a proposal is put forward to limit its application to buildings of 60 metres in all cases, except what we term as residential institutional buildings, where the topmost threshold height would be 30 metres. Again, for buildings outside the scope, the requirement of the building regulations still must be met. Well, it's just that they may be met by application of other documents, for which there are a list included in one of the appendices of the TGD. Indeed, for buildings even within the scope of below 60 or below 30 metres, the characteristics of the building in terms of their complexity still need to be assessed, and it does need to be determined whether or not the TGD is the most appropriate vehicle for their construction. We've consolidated the definitions, which can currently be found dotted throughout the technical guidance document, in the introduction in section 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and in the current Appendix D, into one contiguous section. They've again been reviewed and updated and examined critically in respect of their current application of the provisions of the building regulations. They've been rewritten to ensure that they work holistically within the technical guidance document with all provisions. We've included prima facie provisions to meet the requirements of Regulation B12, that is the provision of information to the owner-occupier of a building on completion of works to allow them to operate the systems installed within the building in a manner in keeping with the requirements of the building regulations. This would mark a point of conclusion of the application of the building regulations in respect of the building, and a point at which the building becomes managed under the Fire Services Act. There's also been a modification or an update to Table 0.1 as it's currently entitled in the technical guidance document, what's termed as purpose groups, to include a day centre as a specific and separate purpose group within the technical guidance document. The day centre is already defined within the building regulations, but a decision was made or proposed to split out this specific purpose group as a change in use from any use to a day centre use requires compliance with the specific building regulations as set out under Article 13.2. The opportunity has been taken to include new provisions within the technical guidance document related to day centres, which are in keeping with current practice and guidance. Moving on to section 1. That the substantive changes within the technical guidance document and additional content within it are found in section 1, but there is additional content dotted throughout the document. We have added information for the prima facie design and guidance in respect of buildings containing flats, shopping centres, small shops and offices that are less than 280 square metres, for day centres, for schools where the provisions are in keeping with the broad application of the building regulations, so limited to matters of structure, for mezzanines in shops, offices, and industrial buildings, and we've included provisions for buildings typically termed as student accommodation, halls of residence, but with alternative configurations. These are sometimes called in cluster accommodation in other jurisdictions. There's a broad requirement being introduced in the draft technical guidance document that sprinklers are to be installed in any residential institutional building of more than one story, or where there's a sleeping risk at upper stories. There are also provisions contained in the technical guidance document for extensions to residential institutional buildings, threshold sizes, floor areas, or percentage increases, whereby sprinkler systems would again be required in the extension. An opportunity has been taken in the document to update tables and diagrams to provide greater clarity and consistency of approach and application of the provisions of the technical guidance document. So the provisions related to subdivision of corridors, which are currently set out under a number of two-dimensional sketches, have been modified in the hope with the intent of providing clarity into the application of subdivision of buildings. Similarly, what's now termed as Table 2, occupancy load factors, has been expanded and modified to be consistent with the new provisions added into the technical guidance document. All the values included in it are again in keeping with current practice. For assembly buildings, the current technical guidance document refers to or cites other documents for the design of stage areas and tiered seating. The paras have been renumbered 147 and 148 with additional details and guidance contained within the technical guidance document itself for the design of stage areas and tiered seating. In carrying out the modifications and examining the characteristic requirements in documents that were heretofore cited in the technical guidance document, due regard and consideration has been given to the holistic approach to the building regulations themselves in the design of buildings. For example, there is a document PS 5588 part 6 cited in respect of staged areas where British standards were cited for arrest against falls, for guarding against edges. We of course have technical guidance document K, which provides guidance in respect of Irish requirements. So the document has been rewritten in a manner that works seamlessly with the suite of technical guidance documents to deliver the requirements of the building regulations. There has been introduced a new section 1.6 for buildings containing flats, where the provisions for escape within units, for common escape routes, for the common enclosed escape routes, typically called the corridor or lobby approach, for open balcony or deck approach, have been included within the technical guidance document. In keeping with the direction of travel provided in the 2020 update to technical guidance document V2006, flats have been structured into two distinct types: open plan flats and flats with a protected entrance hallway. Continuing the definition included in 2020 that an open plan flat is any flat that does not have a PEH. The provision and guidance in respect of means of escape from flats has been developed on that basis. Further provisions are included in the technical guidance document, with escape provisions dependent on the height of the building. So drawings and details, which should be familiar, have been included and incorporated in the technical guidance document as prima facie means of compliance. For the PEH flat, for the small typical open plan flat, there are provisions contained within the technical guidance document for appropriate alternate means of escape where a travel distance exceeds 9 meters and where a PEH is not being provided. We've also kept the diagram introduced in 2020 in respect of the open plan flats without an alternate means of escape and a travel distance of greater than 9 meters, but where a sprinkler system has been provided following the characteristics set out in the technical guidance document. We've also taken the opportunity to examine the requirements for the provision of masonettes, and have simplified the provisions that, for depending on the threshold internal floor heights of the building, the masonette may be treated for floors lower than 4.5 meters as if it is a dwelling, so there would not be a requirement for a protected stairway enclosure. And for any masonette that has a floor height more than 4.5 meters above ground or excess level, a protected stairway enclosure would be appropriate in terms of means of escape. For masonettes with an internal floor height of greater than 7.5 meters above the access level to the masonette, an additional sprinkler system would be required. This again should be in keeping with current practice. For the common areas for escape routes from buildings containing flats, there have been maintained simplified provisions for buildings less than 11 meters. With provisions included in the technical guidance document for balcony approach, for single stair and multi-stair corridor and lobby approach. There is a specific clause proposed within the new draft technical guidance document B that at a threshold height of 30 meters or more within the building containing flats, either 2 stairs must be provided or a sprinkler system throughout the building. There has been added a new section 1.7 for shopping centres, where the required provisions for horizontal and vertical means of escape in shopping centres have been incorporated into the technical guidance document. The provisions include the means of escape within units using dedicated egress corridors using service corridors, the single escape route from kiosks that are less than 25 square meters or 5 meters deep. And again, drawings within the technical guidance document have been modified and updated to provide an indication of the intent of the building regulations, of the provisions of the technical guidance document. We've introduced a new section 1.8 entitled Small Premises. It has been developed in keeping with the citation for small premises within the current technical guidance document, limited to shops and office buildings, with the provisions in keeping with current practice for an open stairs where threshold floor areas do not exceed 90 square meters, and travel distances are in keeping with that set out in the diagrams. Section 1.9, the general provisions, currently the section 1.4, has been again updated and enhanced to provide additional guidance throughout the guidance document. There are a number of clarifications and updates to the provisions in respect of fire doors and escape routes, in respect of fire alarms and refuges, and in respect of the classification of materials used in the construction of buildings. At the moment, the technical guidance document B 2006 cites two methods for reaction to fire classification and for classification for fire resistance. That would be both BS 476 and the European method, classification to ISEN 13501-1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. It is proposed in a new technical guidance document for structural fire requirements that for all new buildings, works be classified to the European test method, that for reaction to fire, that are classified for new buildings and new works to the European test method for fire classification, that is A1, A2, etc. For fire alarms, in keeping with the proposal to introduce a regulatory requirement for alert in case of fire, and Table 13 has been expanded and modified to provide prima facie minimum standards for fire alarm systems in buildings. These should be in keeping with current practice. Again, we have with regard to the provisions of the likes of IS 3218 in developing these requirements. We've also enhanced and added in provisions in respect of the means of escape for all persons from buildings, that the current section 1415 for means of escape for persons with a disability have been expanded, providing new diagrammatic solutions, incorporating requirements if for example, an evacuation lift is specified in the technical guidance document, how that may be met. The TGD does not by itself require an evacuation lift to be installed, but if it is to be installed, it provides guidance on how that is to be met. We've also taken the opportunity to enhance the provisions in respect of the provision of refuge areas for escape routes leading to an external escape stairway or change in landing or level outside of the building, that a suitable, safe place should be provided. Moving on to Section 2, there are very few changes within the current Section 2 internal fire spread linings. However, it is important to note that as I said earlier, for new buildings or for new extensions, all new materials must be classified to the European method of reaction to fire classification, as classified to ISEN 13501-1. And so what has sometimes been termed as a notional equivalency table has been removed, that the table references only Class A, A1, or A2, B, C, D, E materials. There are provisions contained within Section 7 for existing materials in existing buildings. So I'll come on to that when speaking about Section 7. Section 3, internal fire spread structure. There are some additional provisions contained within the section. Notably, there has been an inclusion of provisions for compartment walls or fire resisting walls, where they may heretofore have been specified in a standard cited under section 1. The opportunity has been taken to incorporate those provisions into the technical guidance document, so there should be no change in requirement for the provision of fire resisting walls where they would have been required in the current document. Indeed, in keeping with this practice of incorporation of the provisions in the technical guidance document, the review team for the TGD have had regards to the holistic approach or the consistency of terminology and language in the technical guidance document. That a key objective of the review is to have a common technical understanding of the requirements within the technical guidance document itself. There's a proposal in the TGD to reduce the unsprinklered shop compartment size from 4,000 meters squared to 2,000 meters squared. However, where a shop is sprinklered, the maximum threshold compartment sizes for a sprinkler shop of 8,000 square meters remains unchanged. There's a proposal also to increase the sprinklered high-risk storage compartment size from the current 2,000 square meters sprinklered to 14,000 square meters sprinklered. This is a change in consideration of the rate of fire, the knockdown rate of sprinkler systems in the provision of buildings. There is a proposal within section 3 that where a compartment floor meets with an external wall, that a spandrel or fire resisting zone of protection would be provided. If it is to be a spandrel, to be no less than 0.9 meters high, or a projection of 0.5 meters, which may incorporate a balcony. There's also provision that if a building is sprinklered, these protections would already be met by the provision of the sprinkler system. A recess is also permissible as set out in the new diagram 44. There are provisions contained within the section on the provision of the enhanced protection to the compartment floor external wall junction, that where an atrium is provided within the building, due to the predetermined manner of smoke flows within the building, that such protections are also not required. There's been introduced a requirement for flanking protection where compartment walls meet external walls for two distinct types of building, for the residential institutional buildings and for all buildings except residential institutional buildings. For residential institutional buildings, there's two threshold re-entry angle measurements, that is less than 135 degrees or greater than 135 degrees, at which the zone for flanking protection changes. For all other buildings, it starts at the 90 degrees for half a meter protection. At greater than 135 degrees in all other buildings, there'd be no requirement for such a flanking protection. In keeping with the provisions of the current technical guidance document B 2017, where diagram 17 has been removed from the technical guidance document, the same proposal is put forward in respect of the new draft technical guidance document B. This again is in keeping with the holistic approach to the suite of technical guidance documents delivering the building regulations. So the effect of the removal of diagram 17 would be that where there is a masonry twin leaf wall construction, the cavity barriers must be provided at the compartment floor, compartment wall junctions. Similarly, diagram 22 has been removed for new buildings, diagram 22 relating to the provision of an above ground drainage system and the encasement of that system as a method of protection. There have been introduced new provisions for fire stopping protection of ventilation systems where they pass through fire resisting partitions. There are sub-clauses contained within that new section for various building uses and typologies and for various circumstances. We've incorporated methods for protection, including for ES dampers. And again, in keeping with the holistic approach to the building regulations, for example, there's a specific prohibitory clause in using ventilation systems between between building containing flats, as it would be very difficult to meet our Part E sound requirements where such an open void is provided. An opportunity has been taken to incorporate provisions relating to atria within the technical guidance document up to specific threshold heights, but that are in keeping with current practice and guidance. Moving on to section 4, external fire spread. Again, in keeping with the European method of reaction to fire classification, the opportunity has been taken to focus the requirements of the technical guidance document for new works, new buildings, and new extensions to the European method. There's a key threshold height being introduced in section 4, that for a building with a topmost floor height above 15 meters, the reaction to fire classification requirements apply to the whole wall build-up. That is, every element from the innermost face to the outermost face of the external wall, with the exception of what are termed as excluded elements. And there's a comprehensive list provided of excluded elements. The provisions for reaction to fire classification for the external wall build-up increase with height, following an increase in performance as the height of the building increases. For lower thresholds below 50 meters, there should be limited change in respect of the current requirements. As I said, there is a comprehensive list of excluded elements, for example, insulation within masonry walls, membranes, thermal break elements, etc. It is also permissible under the draft provisions that a test to BS 8414 is appropriate in terms of meeting the regulatory requirements as set out in the draft regulation B4. That a test may be provided or applied in respect of a wall system, provided that the tested wall system is certified as being installed in accordance with the test. There's very little change to the requirements in respect of roof coverings for new building extensions and new materials in existing buildings. Again, in keeping with the previous provisions of reaction to fire classification, the provisions for roof coverings are concentrated on the European test method ISEN 13501-5. Again, supportive provisions are included in section 7 for existing materials, so there's any existing building should not be put to any greater specified requirements than when the building was originally built. For section 5, there are a number of changes within the technical guidance document. There are additional provisions in respect of water supplies, but for water supplies to buildings with a floor height of greater than 1,000 square meters, there are two specific ways to meet the water supply requirements. The first is that the building can be connected to the national water infrastructure provided by Uisce. Alternatively, if that cannot occur due to the location of the site, a minimum threshold static storage volume of 45,000 meters cubed is to be provided. But the final volume of stored water on site does have to take into account the characteristics of the specific building being constructed. That is to say, its overall size, the size of individual compartments, the size of the provision of suppression systems, etc. It's proposed in the draft technical guidance document to provide enhanced internal access for firefighters in sleeping risk buildings that have a threshold height of greater than 11 meters but below 20 meters. So for the purpose group 1C, 2A and 2B buildings, that is buildings containing flats, residential, institutional and residential other buildings, that a dry rising main be provided within the stairway enclosure, and that threshold hose length layouts are specified for such buildings to be met. Of course, above the 20-meter threshold, the requirements in respect of the firefighting shaft still apply. An opportunity to be taken to incorporate provisions relating to firefighting shafts within the new draft technical guidance document, and also to enhance the provisions in respect of switches for firefighting purposes within the TGD, so that there are now provisions included not only for the high voltage discharge lighting, which is in the current TGD, but also for provisions for photovoltaic arrays and for the electrical installation in generally. Moving on to section 6, the new section on smoke control systems. As I said, an opportunity has been taken to consolidate the existing provisions as set out in Technical Guidance Document B relating to smoke control into one seamless section to ensure the delivery of the smoke control systems in a consistent manner. There are additional provisions relating to the provision of smoke control in atria and firefighting shafts, shopping centres, assembly buildings, and buildings containing flats. The section on smoke control systems has quite a deliberate structure, moving first and foremost from the building characteristics. That is the first 4 sections, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5. And in the subsequent 5 sections, specific building uses. So we move from the most common occurrence of smoke management, that is the buildings with a protected stairway. Following on from that, firefighting shafts. Some buildings may contain an atria, some buildings may contain a basement. Then the commensurate requirements in respect of buildings containing flats, industrial and storage buildings, car parks, etc. The provisions in the TGD are in keeping with current practice, but have been enhanced and updated having regard to the upper threshold heights of the technical guidance document. There is a provision in section 6.2 that ventilation of stairways where required is provided by means of AOVs. Again, there are provisions for existing buildings contained in section 7 that are considered as 2 existing buildings. Moving on to section 7. The construction of section 7 was seen again as a key characteristic of the technical guidance document review to provide seamless, clear guidance on the reuse of or on the application of Part B and the characteristic provisions of technical guidance document B to existing buildings. First and foremost, the section in keeping with similar practice in other technical guidance documents provides a method of application of section 7 that where it is possible, the provisions set out in sections 1 through to 6 should be applied. Where there may be a difficulty due to the characteristics of an existing building in the application of those provisions in sections 1 through to 6, there are a number of prima facie provisions that can be applied in section 7 to achieve the requirements of Part B of the second schedule. In the event that these characteristic provisions within section 7 are not enough or cannot provide or cannot meet the requirements set out or as may be discovered in an existing building, but there is provisions within the technical guidance document to apply compensating measures, provided that the fire safety solution is no less than that envisaged within the technical guidance document. To that end, the use of compensating measures for existing buildings is being expanded to all 5 parts of the building regulations. Part B. There is a retention of classification to be as 476 for existing building elements. So for an existing building element where it may have been classified to that system that is permitted to continue to be used, there should be no reason to remove an element from an existing building if it doesn't have classification 13501. There's a specific requirement for change of use to offices of less than 4 stories where a single stairway may be permitted without lobbies, provided that specific characteristic requirements are met. There's a provision that for small premises, that a small premises may be converted to the use of a cafe, provided that any cooking area is at the remote end of the building. For flats, or what's sometimes termed as living over the shop, again, a key objective of government to support the reuse of existing buildings, particularly in change of use to residential accommodation. And there is a specific requirement or provision for the change of use of flats, where for what's typically termed as a small single-stair building containing flats of less than 4 stories, the 11-metre height restriction has been removed. The effect of that is that, irrespective of the topmost floor height, flats may access the stairway directly, provided that they sorry, I guess I lost the train of thought. Yeah, they may access the stairway directly, provided that there are no more than 4 stories. There is a provision also that a reduced stair width of 0.8 meters may be applied, provided that the predicted population of the building does not exceed 50 persons, or 0.9 meters, on the assumption that the population, or the calculation of population, does not exceed 100 persons. The structure of Section 7, again, is quite deliberate. It has been aligned to the foregoing provisions, or the previous sections 1 through to 6 of the technical guidance documents. So Section 7.1 follows on from Section 1 of the TGD, and so on and so forth. Section 7.3, compartmentation, continues the guidance in respect of timber floors in existing buildings. The provisions for compartment floors in existing buildings over 11 meters, I think the current threshold is 10 meters, that existing floors may be constructed of combustible materials, or in keeping with the language within the draft technical guidance document, A2 materials, provided that is not a material change of use to a residential institutional building. Similarly, the provisions of compartment walls in existing buildings over the 11-meter threshold may continue to apply, that they may be less than A2 materials. There's a proposal that the provisions in respect of what's termed as the current diagram 17 will be retained in respect of existing situations in existing buildings. Again, that any existing build-up that would currently meet the requirements would still continue to meet the requirements set out in Part B. Moving on to the appendices. There has been an alignment of the provisions of the appendices with the current technical guidance document B 2017. So there's extensive citation of the likes of the Eurocodes within TGD B 2017, and there's similar citation within TGD, the current draft technical guidance document. As I said, all fire tests for new buildings and new works are specified to the European test method. However, there are specific subsections to Appendix A dealing with existing buildings and existing elements in existing buildings. We've added new items to the current table A1 to account for the additional provisions for fire resisting construction contained in sections 1 through to 7. New diagrams have been added to Appendix C, the methods of measurement, specifically methods of measurement of atria, but also of compartment walls. There's a new Appendix D, sprinkler systems, provided within the technical guidance document, that sets the prima facie provisions with respect to the installation of sprinkler systems. They've all been, the citation of standards for sprinkler systems have all been updated to to the European standards, but also BS 95.1 has been specified. There's a modification to Appendix E, that for high rack storage, any rack storage above 7 meters is considered to be high risk. Therefore, for such storage, again, the threshold floor areas for compartmentation must be met and maintained. That is both with and without the sprinkler systems as set out in Section 3. Finally, there is a new Appendix I, termed Summary of Requirements at Height. In keeping with both the guidance that was contained in TGD 2017, where a simple, straightforward methodology of demonstrating the requirements at different threshold heights for dwellings was provided, but also the likes of bringing back homes and other documents. A decision was made to provide a summary sheet at the back of the technical guidance document, aligned to specific threshold heights dotted throughout the document, to give an indication of the requirements that kick in at different heights. So for the single story, for the building that's less than 5 meters, between 5 and 11 meters, 11 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 60 meters. And there are specific requirements for number of stairways, for wall and floor reaction fire classification, for external wall requirements, for firefighter access sprinklers, and other requirements. So all set out to summarize and to provide a simple approach to application of the technical guidance document. Just moving on to the public consultation. As Paul said at the opening of this evening's talk, the draft technical guidance document was launched for public consultation on the 20th of January. It's been going for just over 2 months. We have about 2.5 months. We have about 2 weeks to go before the close of the public consultation on the 21st of April 2023. We have been steadily receiving comments and observations in respect to the public consultation. We'd fully support, do encourage everyone who has an interest in the technical guidance document to make your views known via the mechanism that's provided. The email address that was established for the purposes of the Part B consultation is available on the screen. It's also available on the department website, housing.gov.ie. Included in that on the public consultation page for Part B is not only the technical guidance document itself, but also the draft building regulations, the regulatory impact assessment, and the comment template sheet. The public consultation is a critical part of the process of the development of any technical guidance document. The open and transparent process of engagement with all stakeholders in respect of the TGD. Each comment that is received is robustly scrutinised. We look forward to receiving and reading all of the comments in respect of the TGD. They can form and do form part of this regulatory process. In summary and in closing, in terms of the technical guidance document, there have been a number of objectives set out as part of the development of the draft document. To create a common technical language, a clear, consistent understanding of terminology and requirements set out through the TGD. To modernise the technical guidance document in keeping with the best and current international practice. To consolidate the provisions into one seamless document that, for the principal design of fire safety requirements, under the new draft TGD, one may only have to read the document itself. Yes, it does cite a variety of standards to meet those requirements, but the principal requirements are contained within the TGD itself. To provide a level of flexibility within the technical guidance document, that where additional provisions have been added, there are a variety of options of how to meet that requirement. To strengthen the provisions of the TGD to ensure to be in keeping with the principles of the Building Control Act, the health and safety of people in and out buildings. To ensure that the TGD continues to be aligned with the other technical guidance documents in a holistic approach to compliance with the building regulations. And finally, to support the reuse of existing buildings, that it provides seamless and consistent information that can work hand in hand with the other technical guidance documents, with other guidance published by the department for that critical reuse of our existing built environment.